the Change Your Mind podcast. I'm your host, Chris Ashley. We explore the intersection between personal development, spirituality, and science. And I think we're going to hit on most of those topics today, which is really exciting. We're going to talk all about receptive brain states and the power of the heart and the vagus nerve and just tying all that spirituality back to the body. So it should be a really fun episode. First, a couple of announcements. Head to the links in my show notes. You'll find links to my free masterclass that happens every few weeks, links to free downloads, of course, a link to my book, Change Your Mind to Change Your Reality, ways to work with me, courses, coaching, ways to connect on social media, and of course, ways to connect with my guest as well. So speaking of my guest, with me, I have Kate Graham. And Kate is a shamanic oracle who has done over 4,000 readings and developed the Empath Energetics Intuition Development and Archetypal Self-Healing Program. Trained as a hypnotherapist, yin and restorative yoga teacher, Thai yoga massage practitioner, aromatherapist, reflexologist, and shamanic practitioner, Kate uses her experiences to teach people how to trust their own bodies and hearts. She has also worked on an alpaca farm, lived nomadically in a van, and moved to the Scottish Highlands to pursue managing a retreat center, all in the name of intuition. Kate helps people explore their subconscious beliefs and is passionate about how to create an experience of deep, radical transformation. So welcome, Kate. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here and so interesting to hear someone talk about you in the third person. It's always so fascinating to have yourself reflected back to you.
Especially when you're like, wow, I've done a lot.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was just thinking. I was thinking, wow, I gave her a really long list.
I know, it's funny. It's like these bios, they end up in the show notes, but we don't think about people like reading them out loud. Sometimes people give me really long ones, and then I'm like, I'm gonna read like a quarter of that out loud, and they're like, but, I like the alpaca farm, so I had to get that in there. I'm an animal lover.
Yeah, I have a hard time keeping that out of my bio as well because it is quite a unique experience. And I'm also an animal lover. I think most sensitive folks are.
Yeah, animals are the best. Yeah, we actually just had to reshoot this because my dog was there. It goes again. All right, I'm gonna ask you a question so you can talk and I can mute. Um, and the question I'm gonna ask you is how I start the same. I start all my episodes the same, and I ask my guests what their origin story is. So, what led you on this path to get all these amazing credentials in the first place and want to go into this work? Please tell us your story.
Yeah, thank you. It is a really interesting story. And for a while, I would always answer it differently depending on who asked me, the context, like which skill did they know that I have, and what was the origin story of that specific skill? When did I decide I wanted to do Thai massage, work compared to shamanic work? And the answer can kind of be different per modality. But the overall one, that I say kind of jokingly, but kind of not, is that, I was suffering. And so, of course, when you're suffering, you look for solutions to that healing, or to, areas that you're looking to heal anyway. And when I was in college, I had all these psychic dreams. And these dreams I didn't realize were psychic at the time, even though that had happened my whole life. I sort of would just brush it off a lot. And I kept going to this place in my mind where I was older and I ran this retreat center and there were these goats and things. And I was so peaceful. I was always so relaxed. And it was like this respite from my life, which I personally felt was really stressful. And, no one around me really knew I was what they would call like really high functioning. So no one really knew how, like, I was, devastated I was internally at that time in my life. But these dreams, they kept coming to me and they kept bringing me this like source of happiness. And, I felt really connected to that version of myself. And so I sort of reverse engineered based on a series of psychic dreams. And then over time, obviously enough things have lined up with me following my intuition, that this opportunity opened up to office manage a retreat center that I end up doing some of my shamanic work at. And so that's what brought me to the Scottish Highlands. And I would also say, I know this is a long-winded answer, but I would also say, I think my mom, growing up, she had a chronic illness. And when I was in my preteen years, I had seizures. So there was sort of some more serious medical things that had me going, how come we don't have answers for this? When I was really young, and I was really inquisitive. So it really was also, I think, a personal thing of wanting to get the skills that I felt maybe could help unlock some sense of, yeah, higher health for my loved ones and myself as well.
Thank you so much for sharing. And, I love that. It's almost like you got a glimpse of the timeline that, like, got a glimpse into another timeline, and then you aligned yourself with that timeline. Like you quantum jumped onto that timeline, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, and now I'm
Um,
doing
yeah.
another one, which is even funnier. It's like another 10-year decade is it's just kind of downloading in, and I'm realizing, oh my gosh, I've got another 10 years of the same quantum leaping, but in a new direction. So it feels exactly how you described it.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. And I appreciate your answer too, because, part of the reason why I ask everyone to share their origin story is because everyone kind of has the same origin story, right? It's that they were suffering, like you said, and they got to a point where they had a choice to make. They could either stay in suffering, stay in victim mode, kind of just give up, or they could take charge of their life and be like, something has to change, and start seeking, right? And I think that that's so inspiring for listeners to hear, because everyone's story is unique, but it all has that same underlying theme to it. And I think it just inspires people that they can do that with their own life if they're in that rough place right now. So I appreciate
Absolutely.
that a lot.
Yeah, I was just talking about that with my father this morning actually, because I'm here visiting Canada for the holidays, and he was talking about someone who he plays hockey with who was really grumpy, and I went, "Wow, they've committed to misery. They've committed to grumpiness. That's that's their choice." And I went, "Can you imagine, needing to work out your aggression on like a local hockey league?" And he went, "I really can't. I'm so glad that's not my life." Yeah,
Totally. It's
but there's a lot of
it's
people who
so
never make
real.
that choice, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a choice. It's absolutely a choice. I know people in my own life, family members who have made that choice, and every time you talk to them, it's just this list of grievances and just negativity, and just like every outlook is negative. And by the way, those people, bad things keep happening to them. It's like one after
Yeah,
another, and you're like, I just want to shake you, because if you could just step outside of yourself and see that your attitude is bringing so much of this on.
mhm. Invites you to react that way to life, and so then even a situation that's neutral is gonna come in and be seemingly chaotic or, yeah, misery ridden, and, it's really incredible. They really do say neuroception's everything. It's like how that person reacts. So I feel for people too. I feel for, the people who are walking through their life really stressed and reactive to everything, and everything around them feels like it's against them. That's a really high state to live in of maybe needing to be really vigilant or tense kind of to react to how you see the world being pointed at you, honestly.
Absolutely. It's like you have to attack before you're attacked, right? It's like
Yeah.
always being on guard. And by the way, it's interesting that you said situations that are neutral, because I believe every situation is neutral,
Me
right?
too.
Everything that happens is neutral. It's like
Yeah,
you place meaning on top of it.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I say that a lot. It's our own reaction to anything that has any importance, because that's how we're going to interpret that information. Then therefore, it changes our decision making. And bridging into the work that I do, it's all in the subconscious mind. It's like, what causes us to even react that way in the first place? What causes you to believe that something happening is either good or bad? How do you, like, when does that trace down? Where did that reaction come from? Was it because your mom said that thing was bad when you were 2 years old? You just intook it as straight fact information, right? It's really fascinating to see the loops where these beliefs and understandings of the world even connect, that shape how we then make those choices later on. It's really interesting.
Totally. And it doesn't even have to be like big traumas or anything. It's like you just said, like someone had an opinion, like an adult you grew up around. And especially when you're under the age of 7, you're just downloading information. You're literally a sponge.
Mhm. Yeah, and a lot of the memories that I get, people will share with me when we're in these deeper hypnotherapy sessions. A lot of the memories they'll share, it's mind blowing how simple the situation was. Like I had one recently, a client was with a story that when her mom was needing to head out, they were going to some event or something, and she was definitely like under two, and she needed her diaper changed. And her mom was so frustrated with her because she needed to go somewhere. And how dare you get in the way of, oh, I was just about to leave the door. And, so that could happen to any mom anywhere, any parent anywhere. you know, I need to get out the door. Oh, this is irritating. I have to stop and help this child of mine, before I leave when I wasn't planning on. It could happen to anyone. And what she actually took from that on a subconscious level was that her existing was inconvenient to people. And it was such a massive root. And it was such a simple situation. It's not like you're going to go back to your mom and say, you really should have fixed that behavior because, mom didn't mean anything by that. That was just like a moment. It's amazing how incredible, actually, how vast all of the different beliefs then come out of that. If you just understood at 2 years old that you existing and having human functions is kind of inconvenient for others, you're then trying to withhold everything. Now this client has gut issues today. It's like no surprise, that she would be like holding a lot of tension in that area, worrying that it might upset someone, but totally subconscious, totally wasn't known to her before that session.
That's wild. And also, as someone who's 8.5 months pregnant, a lot of freaking pressure, right?
Just
Um,
remember, it's okay. You'll mess up,
yeah,
and they'll heal through it.
yeah, and then when the kid's, like, 25, she'll get hypnotherapy and figure out how I screwed up her life.
Yeah.
Um, I have a friend who had a similar story. She actually has had a couple similar stories, but she always would tell me, like, "I have the worst birthdays." Like, every year, like, my birthday is, like, super depressing, bad things always happen, and I don't know how she came upon the memory finally, if she was, like, doing some somatic work or something, but when she was, like, maybe, like, 11 or 12, they had just gotten back from dinner, her and her family, and they wanted to light the cake, and she was like, "Okay, I'm gonna go change." And they were like, come on," and she was like, "Okay, I'm changing." And they lit the candles and started singing without her, and she just like, she kinda came out in the middle of it, and it rooted something in her. I don't know, like, what the actual belief was, but it was something about, like, her birthdays weren't important, or, that she wasn't the priority, and ever since then, she had bad birthdays, and then she had that belief, right? She would say, "All my birthdays suck, they're always bad," and so, of course, she would just, like, keep manifesting that, and, hopefully this year it'll change, but, yeah, it's
Yeah.
wild. It's so
That's
crazy.
like the old folk tale, like fairy tale version of a curse. That's like actually what you're doing, right? It's just being like, I am cursed, therefore I am cursed. And so now the rest of my life, this curse is upon me. And so every year, the same time, you expect the curse, you look for the curse. Where's the curse hiding? Oh, I found the curse. It was behind the door the whole time. It's like you're looking for the curse to make it make sense, to make it true. Otherwise, the other things were just bad happenings. And it's difficult to be with those emotions.
Yeah.
I spoke about that last year in talking about how it's important for us to be receptive in order to even get clear intuition, to get a clear sense of how things are. So we're not influencing it with all these the beliefs that are coming up. And one of the things that I find really interesting about people is that they're like, when they're really sensitive, they don't actually want to feel the fullness of the feeling, so they'll
Mm.
do anything to kind of try avoid the depth of that feeling. And that's kind of a similar situation, right? Maybe she didn't really want to feel, I mean, I don't know, your friend, of course, so this is like we'll remove her from the actual situation now, but it's almost like, okay, wonder if if that a bad birthday was such a hard feeling to actually go back to or to fully feel, that it's like we're just going to try and avoid it, like go right back from that. You're going to see it as bad so that way you don't have to deal with something being bad again and that same feeling coming up, if that makes sense. Like, for it to rise up again would feel so intense. So if you pre-label it, you already know what you're getting, and then you can kind of work with that a little easier.
That
All
makes
to
sense.
avoid
It's
the
like a
real
defense
feeling.
mechanism. That
Yeah, yeah. It's like most things that we do as defaults are kind of, yeah, defense mechanisms, right? We're just trying to live, trying to stay alive.
Yeah. It's so fascinating how the human mind works because, like you said, when you actually look at these scenarios, they're so simple, and it's so obvious that, her family didn't mean anything by it, or that mother that you were talking about didn't mean anything by it. But it's just mind-blowing how we internalize things and how we form these beliefs around things or try to cope with things.
Yeah,
It's wild.
yeah. All the creative ways that we work around our pains and things. And again, I think it's really interesting the amount of things people do to avoid feeling fully. they're feeling, and so then that subconscious belief system gets like really affirmed over time, right? It's amazing how it can get cemented, and then you're, grumpy playing hockey at some point in your life. Hopefully not, but
Yeah, hopefully not. At least he's taking it out in the hockey puck, right? Not
yes, I
a
guess
person.
he said that this guy shoved someone, and I went, oh, I wonder where that came from. It was probably his 10-year-old self.
Yeah, yeah. So what else do people do to avoid these feelings that you've noticed?
I do notice a lot of people, actually, especially in the spiritual world, they like to label something with like something that feels a lot glossier to kind of remove themselves even from the situation. It'll happen kind of, what's like a label someone might use? They might label others. I hear this one a lot actually because of the Empath Energetics program, that people will label someone else as a narcissist and therefore then create this entire, like, they've got a whole villain in their life now. It's amazing, so then it becomes such a dramatic story. I think coming from a film world, so that's what I studied back in college, and what I first did was working in film, and I see this like dramatic storyline in a lot of healing work as well. It's like someone wants to be the hero, and then what does the hero come with? Also some martyrdom, because oh, no one really gets the hero, right? They have to have that kind of like separation from others. And then heroes have these major villains being like these narcissists, or that like awful awful step parent, or like there's always these like tropes of, or your boss or something. I don't know, they'll just make it to be like a fixation of what a villain kind of in their life looks like. And it in a way it's like choosing to also be disempowered, because the hero, it's like fighting against sometimes forces that they can't even rise up to. I always think about that. What if the hero actually just joined the local comedian, or sorry, not the local comedians, local community. Maybe they need comedians maybe to make people laugh, but it's like, what if they actually join the local community? What if they join the local forces who are like against these evils? It often feels like the hero is just some, like, rebel on their own. And it feels kind of like an orphany type of archetype actually that they do.
I love that you just went there because this is something I talk about in my show a lot and in my work, and I love talking about it with people and hearing people describe it, and I've never heard it described as, like, the hero's journey, but that's such a fantastic way of putting it because, psychology even tells us that people don't want to admit that they're wrong, right? Like they will do anything to place blame on others where everything that happens was someone else's fault. It was an external event or circumstance or situation, like they're the victim. And when people stay in this victim mode, like you said, there's perks to it, right? They can be the martyr, they get to avoid feeling guilty, they get to avoid taking accountability or responsibility. Sometimes they get pity, right? Sometimes they get attention, like all of these things. But what they don't get is they don't get to step into their own power, like you said, and like take charge of their own healing. And it's something that I've seen so much in the past few years, so much, especially with social media and everything going on. It almost feels like the world rewards victimhood right now.
Yeah,
And
it's like we bond over the connection of things that are difficult for us, but then it goes to an extreme somewhere. It becomes everyone's identities. So your challenges are who you are, and that doesn't make any sense. On a soul level, it makes no sense.
exactly. Yeah. No, I think that that's so well said, that it becomes their identity. And
Mhm.
and then that's really hard to even have a conversation about because then they feel like their identity is being attacked, right?
A lot of my work, Chris, is really attacking identities. So I know the feeling. It's my clients will say, sometimes you're like a feather and sometimes you're like a punch, because it feels like a lot to separate from the selves that we thought we were. And so I think that's also why I end up doing archetypal self-healing in the empath program, because it's like, yeah, these sensitive people kind of forget who they are. So they need to actually know different aspects of themselves in order to come back to even focusing on that, not blaming the outside world, because that is what I notice a lot. I did a lot of thinking on these highly sensitive people. They can pick up on so much. They're so wise in so many ways, and yet everything is against them, and life is really hard for them, and they're always complaining about being sensitive. It made no sense to me. And then I started understanding, okay, what is it that they're actually really focused on being their problems? Like how do they view it kind of themselves? And often it was this kind of pointing at other people or saying this is always going to happen to me. I'm just built this way, therefore that. And so then when we do this archetypal work, we do shadow work first to get out the gate and really look at, hey, what are these things maybe that you're not quite admitting to the fullest of yourself that are challenges. And then the light work, you have to clear even deeper shadows. The light work itself to actually lighten up in life, to really get up to any more energy and to be more of yourself, you've got to deal with those things that were unknown and holding you back. Because otherwise, you would have already cleared them. Because why wouldn't you just want to feel better, want to feel lighter? But we
Yeah.
really don't know the stuff that actually holds us back from the light. That's to me such a darker shadow than people talk about. And then after that, it's legacy work. Because again, it's also too about like the impact we have on others. And I think if you're just so busy pointing fingers at what's outside of you and you don't take that journey inward, your own heroic journey, like back to yourself, then you're always going to be looking out for the villain and be like, where's he hiding? What's he up to next? And it's like, man, what? Like, that's not really a way to live a life. Like, do heroes retire? Do they get to put their feet up at some point in life and enjoy this safe world that they've contributed to? Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, and I like that you were talking about the shadow work within the light because it goes back to what your story, like that woman probably didn't remember what happened when she was 2 years old, right?
Not at
Like
all.
we don't
Absolutely.
yeah, there's no way. So it's like we have to do that work and work with someone like you to figure out what's even there, right? Otherwise, it's just not on the conscious level. And then also to talk about the villain thing and pointing fingers, like everyone's really a reflection of you anyway.
Yeah.
So, like these people are showing up in your life if you have quote unquote villains to show you something, to teach you something, to give you a mirror back to an unhealed aspect of yourself. So, life is really happening for us. We're not victims of anything.
Yeah, and it's amazing to me actually when people get so far away from their human heart and that they struggle to actually feel sympathy or empathy or compassion for their villains as well. Like that's something that I always found really fascinating is when some offense or atrocity may come my way in life, as it does, as it happens, people hurt us in life. I would often be like just immediately trying to understand how that person could even come to that place to hurt me, that I was, not even really tending to my own feelings. I was like, wow, why is that person really acting out? Someone should give them a hug. Not me, maybe, but someone should give them a hug. And I would try and think on, I wonder what they lacked in their childhood or blah, blah, blah. And really, it's still not serving myself because then there's also my feelings at the end of the day even. So there is also a balance because I'll see some people with that imbalance who will come in so sensitive to everyone else's issues. They actually don't even have an awareness of where they're at in their own feelings. So we were talking about that before is like, what's even the point of all these things, these receptive states? It all brings you back to the body because that's actually such a wise meter for how you're reacting to anything, how you're dealing with anything that comes your way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to echo what you're saying. Like when people are lashing out at you or causing you pain, like they're usually coming from a place of their own pain and fear. And it usually has nothing to do with you, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So, talk to me about bringing it back to the body. You just said the body is a great meter. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating thing with the way the world went for a few years there with the pandy, because before that I was doing in-person body healing, right? So my laundry list of Thai massage and aromatherapy and reflexology and all these things. I had this beautiful little in-person healing space that I was like less than a year into business, but I'd been serving out of my living room before, so I was really just really working with people and wanting to give back in that way. And what I noticed when I was working with people is that they'd want to talk to me. And I went, oh, I'm not really trained to talk. I've just got all these other skills. But as I was working on someone, I might, be working on their foot and a song would kind of start coming into my head, or I'd be working on their heart and I'd really feel something that had gone on for them emotionally, maybe years prior. And if I would describe it a little bit, they would really see themselves in what I was saying. And it really shocked me because it was so not logical. And I come from a really like, I come from being in like gifted programs and trying to be quite analytical about everything. And it really was like, ooh, I don't have any reason to believe this, exists. But this thing kept happening. And people, they'd see me for 2 hours and they'd want at least half an hour of that to be us just talking and connecting. It wasn't, any of these trainings that I was certified for. Then the pandemic hit. And I went, "Uh-oh, I've got to move everything online. I can't touch anyone anymore. I can't do this hands-on work." And so I started actually just intuiting and reading into what was going on for people. And as actually, it's so fascinating how it's worked really in the timing of my life and career. I think it's given me a really unique lens on things because I built that empath program, was able to learn so much more about the subtle realms, the energy, and then now being able to work with people again, I'm realizing how it all draws back to that place. And that actually, if I'm talking to someone over Zoom doing this empath work, but they're so stressed out and they're so distracted with what's going on in their life. And, I'll have like people's kids will come in and be like, "Oh, I want to show you this toy," like in the middle of a session or something. You'll have all these distractions and all these things happening. If you're not able to actually take in for yourself what's going on in your body and to have a felt experience, it's going to be really difficult for you to build a belief system. So the
Mhm.
reason that hypnotherapy works so well is because people get into a relaxed state. That relaxed state allows them to then really be with and feel these things without interruptions of what am I doing? What am I getting for groceries? My foot hurts, whatever the thing is, any of the distractors. And so that's like the through link that I've found now. Any of the things that I can do online is all about myself also being in a relaxed and receptive state. I can't really go on a shamanic journey if I'm tapping my foot and hiccuping or something like that. It'd just be so distracting. I wouldn't be able to like kind of go and let my mind drift to where it needs to be. And I think like even in times where people don't do any of this type of work, I say my father, he's like accidentally enlightened because he'll drift off, staring through a newspaper or something like that. And it's in that drifting off space that he gets, the clarity, the wisdom, the solution to whatever thing that, you were thinking through. But to me, it's like you're still not going to get that unless your body's actually relaxed. And so, what happens to all these villains? They're acting out of traumatic states. Like I would say, narcissistic folk are acting out of some trauma state that they built as a kid that was like, if you really make everything about you, or if you only see things through your lens, that protects you. Because if you were to start feeling into maybe their parents were fighting, and if they started feeling into that fight, they would really be torn apart. Okay, then I'm just going to focus on me. That person learns over time that this is, like you said before, it's a defense mechanism that then becomes like an ingrained choice, like an identity that people choose. So it's in that kind of, most people when they do a spiritual journey, they have to dissemble, their identity a little bit. I think that's really important. It's like you've got to untether these things in order to figure out what is actually remaining, and then you're not going to be able to feel that stuff until you have less interruptions in the way, being like, I'm like this, or this is my current issue, or my suffering looks exactly like this and that's the way it has to stay, right? My birthday's going to be bad every year. That's a choice, that will stretch out over time. If you took that belief away, then it's just a neutral, yeah, a neutral experience. And hopefully with neutral experiences we would then build maybe positive emotions and positive feelings. People like those, right? And so over time, I realized how everyone I worked with, unless they were in a relaxed place, they weren't going to like come to that feeling of, I trust myself, I know what I want to do, or I can get through that trigger, or this situation makes it more sense to me. Like, honestly, whatever healing mentally, emotionally that people are doing, it always happens from that place of actually being able to relax and receive. And that the way that we like are in our especially our western world, the way that we are in this like modern age is quite reactive and quite responsive to things. And so it breeds a certain level of like sensitivity because we're actually, I think we're just processing a lot more. Think about the amount of words and images people see today compared to like in medieval times. you know
Absolutely. Yeah.
right? That's a lot to actually intake and process. And so if I could help everyone in the world, I would help them, like world leaders, get into relaxed state and receiving states. And then you're able to actually intuit what feels right, what is best. Making choices, you have three options. One's going to feel the best, but how do you feel you're feeling if you're not able to be in your body for long enough, if you're not relaxed and you have, again, all these interruptions.
Yeah, and that makes absolute total sense, especially when we're talking about tapping into our intuition and reprogramming our subconscious and all of those things. Like there's so much noise happening,
Mhm.
right? And unless you get quiet, like how could you possibly hear what's really going on? And
Exactly.
also while you were talking, it just made me think about how like we're born perfect, right? And like healing is more like unlearning things, right? It's like undoing all this conditioning. This crap has just been like piled on top of us, like adults' opinions, but also like societal opinions and cultural conditioning. And yeah, it's yeah. Like, I think when you were talking about, like, how there's so much more going on, I was thinking about, like, walking down the Las Vegas Strip or something, where it's just, like, lights and billboards and people and cars, and it's just, like, chaos. Like, of course, it's hard to get down to your true inner self with all of that happening. It's like the world's, like, screaming at you.
Absolutely. I even think that, like, down to a day to day, you open your cupboard and there's like 6 boxes of cereal staring out at you, and you just think, "Man, I'm taking in, Tricks Are for Kids, I'm taking in Honey Nut Cheerios, I'm taking in, oh, is it a granola day?" And it's so many pieces of information, whereas, like, in the past, you'd be like, "Oats. Oats is all we have."
I'm gonna eat that boar. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So all these extra decisions that come into our lives, it's like we have a higher demand now for this type of work in clearing that subconscious, because hey, there's a lot more sticking in there nowadays. I really do think. And then also just being able to relax people, because I think we are really, really quite reactive, quite responsive to most stimuli. And it's not serving us collectively, globally, for sure. It's very distracting, like you said, we don't
Yeah.
need more distractions.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, this all links back to receptivity and brain states and getting into that place where our nervous system can calm down. And then we get to tap into these higher states of enlightenment and intuition and even genius, right? So, talk to me a little bit more about like the science behind intuition and genius. And I know you also teach about like the vagus nerve and stuff like that, which also has to do with calming the nervous system. So, I love to geek out on the science side as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I like to geek out on like the story and the myth and the psychological frameworks. And then I love also to geek out on the actual scientific, the brain itself, how our nervous system works. When I first learned about heart mind, heart brain coherence, and also the idea of like energy transference, that hey, when someone hugs me, we are actually doing a little energetic exchange, and how sweet that is, and how you hug someone who feels really calm, and you end up taking that in. And that idea of co-regulation, it came up so much when I was doing Thai massage, because I would feel like I was helping someone actually just unwind by sitting there and one hand on their back. You really didn't need even more than that. That's why this, compassionate touch has become a thing, because it's as simple as just the transferring of your peaceful energy of your nervous system to theirs. You think, oh, if you had a really stressed out mother and you're a baby, and they're like, walking and rocking you, but they're really stressing about taxes or something, you're going to feel that compared to someone who's just like, wow, what a sweet baby I'm holding. It's just such a different energy. We
Yeah.
take it in differently. The vagus nerve, when that first came up into my awareness, I was really, really so excited that it was, to me, whenever was reading about it, it felt like it was like a light switch on or off of this nervous system that we're trying to, disengage, which is so, so reactive to everything. And to have an off switch for that, and to tell people it's as simple as getting a hug or humming, gargling. I don't know if you know this, but gargling water is like one way to stimulate and activate the vagus nerve into a state of relaxation. Because
I
it would
didn't
be,
know that. I
yeah, it'd
know a
be
lot
really
about
hard to
like
do that if
calming.
you're stressed, right? You can't gargle water if you're stressed
That makes
because you'd be choking. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, totally
Yeah.
makes sense. Like your body has to go from panic mode to like digestive or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And you have to be like relaxed enough to also like not just drink the water. It's a funny paradigm. Humming, like low humming, which is really interesting. I love to sing all the time, so it gave me permission to be like, I'm just activating my vagus nerve.
Yeah.
That was so fascinating to me, because we realize how many receptor points that are major there are in the body versus just the brain as far as these electrical signals and nerve signals go. Nerve and electricity, like the combination between those two things is really endlessly fascinating for me. So I love thinking of the body as a machine. And when
Mhm.
I had seizures when I was a kid, they would be absent seizures. So my brain would sort of check out. And it was almost like my computer system inside my brain, it was like doing a refresh, it was like shutting down. And then, you could see something on the screen and come back up. And we're like, okay, where are we? Okay, we've got some of these same windows open. That's cool. And just try to, put everything together. When I realized the vagus nerve, if I had tools when I was a kid, I really wonder, would I have stressed out enough that it would even have caused a seizure? Or could I have actually like stopped that engagement of activity every time? So cool to me. Any vagus nerve technique, I think, really opens up your ability to release that nervous system buzz, that distraction, that we were talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So wait, okay, what kind of okay, you had the absent-minded seizures. You just piqued my
Yeah.
interest because I know a couple people who have those types of seizures.
Yeah.
So so do you think it has to they're brought on by stress? Is that what you're saying?
So yeah, so when I was younger, that was what I was told about mine. So I had girls were bullying me at school. Girls were really like harsh to me, and I was really stressed out. We'd moved cities like a really decent distance, maybe like a couple years before that, and then it's preteen times, right? So you have hormonal shifts and stuff like that, and it
Yeah.
is more common for females at that age to also develop that type of seizure. So it is very much stress related. And she gave me actually my doctor at the time, she gave me this book that Mean Girls was based off of. And I don't know if you know this, but Mean Girls, the fictional movie, was based off a nonfiction book about like high school cliques and things like this. And so at this young age, yeah, it's so crazy. I didn't know this either. But it's really interesting. It was like where different people sit, and it was trying to help me like understand social dynamics and why people might be acting the way that they were, peers around me. But it was really interesting. It would happen way more often if there was a lot of stress going on. My brain would sort of just leave this world. And nowadays, that's my work is helping people leave that like super conscious state of mind and just go. So I joke now with my shamanic friends that that was just me going to the non-ordinary realm. I just didn't come back with anything. I just didn't know I'd left.
Yeah, it's come full circle too.
Yeah, and it's common. I've met a few people who have these types of seizures as well, and it is really common for them to have shamanic experiences or spiritual experiences. And at that time, at that age, I was actually doing a lot of religious exploration, trying to understand what were my beliefs at that point. And it was all a solo journey. No adults around me really knew what I was doing. I was questioning a lot and trying to figure out how is it that I feel connected to divine and things. And so it's not surprising at all that I would develop some sort of extra tension overworking in my crown, in my third eye. This is the area that I was really working on healing. I was really, really active.
Yeah, that's really
Yeah,
fascinating. That's super, super
exactly.
fascinating.
Now you know why I'm so fascinated by the nervous system.
Yeah.
From an early age, I was like, how is this happening? Am I short circuiting?
Yeah, you're like, "My computer's rebooting. What's going on?"
Yeah, exactly, exactly, yeah, and I would find any challenge that people come with in the body, I'm always trying to relate it to some, like, technological or sort of mechanical way of understanding things, just because I think it's helpful to see it that way as well as how does it feel or, what is it going through your body, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So so what haven't we talked about yet when it relates to the body and the nervous system or even archetypal self-healing that you feel is really important to get out to listeners?
I think what's really really important is that people approach their healing work and their discovery of self with as much as they can a feeling of lightness and curiosity, because what I notice in the healing realm is a lot of seriousness, a lot of black and white. I need to know exactly why this is the way it is, and I need to solve this thing forever. And like the journey, and they say that the journey is greater than the destination, but it's the journey and the joy, I think, of self discovery along the way that really is why we are alive, like why we are here, why we feel pain. It's so that we oscillate. It's not so that we stay stuck or that we ascend and then stay basically in the clouds our whole rest of our lifetime and, think that we're above everyone. It's like 0% about that. And I see a lot of that in the spiritual world and online, and it keeps people running at a really like high anxious frequency because it's like you're always trying to be something that's outside of yourself. And so this divine connection and this peace that we are seeking outside of ourselves, it super resides within us. And so the only thing that I would tell people is just if you can lighten up and be curious, then it's going to have that process be a lot less painful. It's not ripping off band-aids, right? It's like, I don't know, how would you do it if you were going to not just rip off a band-aid? What's the softer way of that? Like
Oh
taking a
no, because it
baseball?
sounds painful to go really slow with a Band-Aid,
I
but
know, right? That's not a good metaphor for what I'm saying then.
but I totally understand what you're saying.
Yeah,
I think
up until the Band-Aid.
well, maybe if we keep working at it, we'll find the right meta because
Comment below if you can finish my metaphor for me.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And I have, like, total pregnancy brain, so I'm, like, not the right person to be, like,
You're
trying to come
you're
up
no
with
help right
right
now.
now.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no help at all. But it makes me think about, like, how everything is a spiral, right? Like, we keep coming back to those lessons or those truths, and I know what you're talking about with that. It's almost like a little bit of spiritual ego that can happen, where
Mhm.
it's like, "Oh, I've healed this thing, like, I'm enlightened, I've got this," but, like, life keeps happening, right?
Yeah.
And there's gonna be challenges, there's gonna be adversities, and, sometimes it's a little bit of a knock when you confront a similar situation and you're like, "Oh, maybe I didn't fully heal from that," right? Maybe there's more work to do. And
Yeah, fully healed is such a ruse in and of itself, right? The fully healed is just a phrase that makes me laugh, what's the
yeah,
point in that?
right. If we were fully healed, we would be on the other side, right? But,
I
like
mean, you gotta think, right?
yeah.
Something crazy would happen. So you're
Yeah,
probably not there yet.
yeah, like, I feel like yeah, 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 it's interesting. I have so much to say about this. Like, I have a brother-in-law who meditates, like, for 5 hours every day, and he spends all this time with Buddhist monks, and I think that's so cool, but I'm also like, I don't know if I could do that because I chose to come here and be this imperfect human right now to learn all these lessons and to level up and to learn more about myself in the process. Like you said, it's like the journey, right? Like when we're in the midst of this 3D world, like that's when we're learning and growing, right? Like when
Absolutely.
challenges happen and when we're curious and when we're seeking truths and when we're discovering new teachings and discovering new healing modalities and discovering new people on our path, right? That's kind of like the richness of life, right?
It's true. It's like, well, going back to the hero, right? It's like, would we see Hercules as a hero if there weren't any of these trials or tribulations? If there weren't any monsters that needed to be slain, along the way? Would we even be able to see him as a hero? It's through that challenge that you can actually, yeah, grow into your life purpose. And I love the idea of just being able to be somewhere peaceful and meditate, and perhaps there's some really deep thought and philosophies that are going to come out of that time. I, like you though, I think am called in these directions. We all have like a soul, mission. I'm called in these directions to go into stuff that feels super challenging. Like I had a vision come through last summer that has stayed with me since, about starting and investing and supporting in an orphanage. I'm like, that's going to be really rough. My little heart is going to have such a hard time with that. And that's going to take a lot of work. And there's going to be a lot of like, um, hurdles. That's just so different from what I currently do. But you step towards it knowing, hey, this is part of what you're here to figure out, to be imperfect, to stumble along the way, and then that's how you learn how to keep running down the hill. And all of this stuff happens only by doing and not by sitting and analyzing or saying, checked, I'm healed, I'm fully healed now, or this person gave me a certificate and therefore I am, blah 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 blah.
Or
It's
I've
in
read
the
these books.
Yeah, exactly. It's there's so much books can give us, and then there's so much life that will teach us perhaps sometimes the opposite.
Totally. And, just think about your orphanage example. I've found, at least in my life, that I've done all of this different type of work, right? I taught English, I worked in tech, I ran yoga teacher trainings, I'm a coach, I'm an author, but I've found that they all like now that I'm where I am, I understand why I needed to do each of those things because they all brought this important piece into my journey. And you're like totally nodding, like you get it, right? And
Yes.
they're seemingly unrelated, but it's like you get that to that point where like, oh, I get why I had to go through that now or do that now, right?
Absolutely. Like when I was a virtual assistant, every single one of my clients was teaching me a very specific, important skill and quality that I was going to need for my own business later.
Yeah.
Right. And working at the alpaca farm, like there are so many valuable things that I had in that moment of life. And that's now a story that, stays with me, carries through. I lived in my van and then now I'm living abroad overseas. There's this like the way that if I wrote down all the jobs that I have worked some strange, unique, and been a very dynamic, very storied life for only being 31. Whenever I look at that, I go, oh my gosh, I can't wait to see the next 5-10 years and how many things we can do with this one precious lifetime. So I'm similar minded to you and similar frequency of the like, I'd really like to also like squeeze every last drop of life and just keep going and just keep growing and actually savor the juice, enjoy the juice, right? I don't want to wait for whenever I've moved on to then sit and savor that juice that we've squeezed here. It's a constantly regenerating cycle. I run out in the fields, I grab the fruits, I squeeze them, I enjoy it, and then I'm back the next day. And so it's like actually getting all parts of the journey many times over is the goal.
I love how you just said that. That was so beautifully said. And I think that's a great place to just leave it today because I loved our conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time. I love your perspective. Everything you're teaching is fabulous, and I'm sure our listeners are loving your perspective as well, and they want to know how to get in touch with you. So let them know what your programs are, where they can find you, where you are on social media, all that stuff.
Yeah, after a lot of debate, I decided I am going to bring back an Empath Energetics round. So, spring of 2024, I'll be doing another Empath Energetics round. It's like my signature program of doing all this wildly deep work, but in a delightfully light-hearted way. Even though it's shadow work, it's light work that brings more shadows. It can sound kind of intense, but that's one of my favorite ways of working with people. And they can find me online too. So I'm at heartsfrontier.com, or on Instagram, I'm shamanic oracle Kate. And I'll be doing lots of art this year. It's something we didn't even touch on because there, isn't enough time in any one podcast, truly. But I'm releasing an album of my ancestral pilgrimage story this year. That's my ancestors' poems I've made into songs. So it's a lot more of like the shamanic coming home to self journey. So yeah, lots of ways to interact with me. I'm on YouTube as well. So I'm sure we'll share the links and things below. So yeah, Kate Graham, Hearts Frontier. Ophelia Goodness is my artwork side of myself. And yeah, I was really, really enjoying our conversation as well. And if anyone from your sphere, we want to talk again, I'm happy to do so. So thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And yes, all of those links will be in the show notes. So if someone didn't get a chance to write them down as they're listening, you can always go back. And Kate's amazing. So go work with her. She's in the Scottish Highlands and has lived on an alpaca farm. I mean, come on.
Who knows where I'll be if we do a session? Who knows where I'll be in time? But my clients are fairly used to me popping up anywhere now.
That's awesome. I love it.
Thank
And yeah, if you resonated with this episode, please like, comment, subscribe, share it with someone you think could use it, and be part of the community. And I'll see you all in the next episode. Have a beautiful rest of your day.